once it connects to the server. And you will have heard of the recording in progress starting there. So I will pass over to Matt now to get started. He probably doesn't need too much of an introduction to this group here. But yeah, as he said, Matt is the co-founder and digital accessibility specialist at Modality Co and also works for the NDIS or the NDIA as a digital accessibility specialist. He's worked for Vision Australia in the past, Centre for Inclusive Design as well, and has been working in the industry for, I think it's over 10 years now. I think you're being a little bit humble and saying under 10 years, and has been doing a lot of research in the past months into voice navigation and some of the main reasons that we need to test for it as particularly as accessibility professionals, as it's often missed out from the testing as it's not super well covered in the web content accessibility guidelines. It is one of those ones that is just a little bit left to the wayside. A lot like cognitive disability is left to the wayside as well. Somehow I've ended up with all the disabilities personally that aren't super helped by the web content accessibility guidelines. So that's one for me to ponder on. So I will let Matt give his wonderful presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. Please feel free to put comments or any questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring that as we go along, and we'll field any or flag Matt down if he's got a question for you to answer as well. So I will let you get started.
Matt speaking. Thank you, Rosie. That was a fantastic intro. So I don't think I need to add anything more to that. So I'll dive right in. What we'll chat about tonight. So we're going to do a little intro to voice input. We're going to talk about sort of what it is, what sort of options you have for voice input on different devices as well. And we'll also go over some of the main commands or commonly used voice commands that you might use when using voice control. And also got a little demo sort of showing how it works as well. We'll then go into some common accessibility issues. So going into mostly focusing on web, going to be looking at different types of issues that I commonly see that people who use voice input run into. And we're going to talk about why they happen and how we can avoid them through good code. And then we'll do a little wrap up at the end. So that's pretty much all we're going to be talking about. So intro to voice input. Voice input is an assistive technology that allows a user to use their voice to control a device. Typically, for it to actually work well, you would want a directional microphone near your mouth, and you also don't want a lot of sounds, especially voices around you, which can often be quite challenging in office spaces. Sometimes people need their own private office, or they need to put up sound barriers around them to prevent sort of crosstalk from other people going into your microphone, which then in turn controls your computer. So that's always a big consideration with voice input. And for some of the voice input AT that we're going to be talking about, you do need a pretty beefy computer. There is some people I know who've had to upgrade their machines in order for the voice input to work more reliably. And even on quite powerful machines, sometimes you just need to not have as much open at once. So not have too many Chrome tabs open. If you're one of the people who likes to have a million Chrome tabs open, you might need to do that less if you actually want the voice input to be able to listen to you. But it does depend on what tool you decide to go with. Like most assistive technologies out there, there are several free and commercial options available. So you do have the very expensive commercial options, or you got the ones that are free, or you got the ones that are inbuilt already in your device. So there are many different options and price points available. And you can use voice input for two main purposes. One of them is navigating, so clicking on things or tapping on things on your phone or swiping. So navigating around your device is one key purpose for using voice input. Another key purpose is dictating. which is typing with your voice, also known as speech to text. That would be another key reason why you might want to use voice input. So for people who use navigation and dictation, these would typically be people who may have a limb difference or paralysis affecting their arms, hands, or fingers. People who experience pain or numbness from typing or using a mouse. So that could be, for example, arthritis. And also people who are blind or low vision can also make use of speech navigation as well. So that with a JAWS screen reader, there is a tool available called JSay that allows you to combine JAWS with Dragon NaturallySpeaking, which is one of the voice input tools we'll talk about shortly. But yeah, that allows you to actually control your device using voice while also using a screen reader. So there are options like that available as well. For dictation only, people who are dyslexic or have other similar reading disabilities may benefit from speech to text. So there are plenty of people who use tools like Dragon just for the text-to-speech part of it, and they never use the navigation part of it. So it depends, what you need it for and how the tool is useful for you. And a bit of an oddball one, lawyers really benefit from tools like Dragon. And in fact, if you go to the Dragon website and you look up the tool, it actually talks a lot about legal professionals and talks a lot about the lawyer profession, because in that profession you have to do lots of note taking and you need that dictation to be accurate. And that's what Dragon NaturallySpeaking prides itself on, as being a very accurate dictation tool. Funnily enough, it doesn't talk too much around people with disabilities on the tool. So yeah, it's interesting who they sort of market to. And for your options of different voice input technologies, so if you are going to go with Dragon, that is going to set you back over $1,000 unless you get some other funding to support that. So it's a very, very expensive tool. I mean, it is marketed to lawyers, so for lawyers it's probably not that big of a deal, but for people with disabilities, it can be a pretty steep asking price to fork out that amount of money. Thankfully, there are free options available. So there is one tool out there called Utterly Voice. It is currently free. It might have a price in the future, but Utterly Voice is a great free alternative to Dragon. I'll say its dictation isn't quite as good as Dragon, but it's fairly good. And as far as a navigation tool, I find it stands up pretty well, and in some cases even better than Dragon. And we will talk about some examples of that a little later. Windows Speech Recognition is another tool that's available on Windows machines. In Windows 10, it's pretty so-so. In Windows 11, I heard that it got better. I don't know how much better. I think the actual recognition of what you're saying got better. So that part of it did improve. But yeah, that is a free tool that's already available in the accessibility settings on Windows devices. And there are other options on Windows. I personally haven't tried them though, but I know they do exist.
Rosie speaking. Matt, sorry, I just had my hand up before, but I don't think you
Oh,
can see
sorry.
it.
Yeah, I can't see it, so butt in if you need to.
Okay. Firstly, I'm just going to read a comment from James, which says dysgraphia is the most common condition for students I set up with Dragon, besides other physically restrictive conditions, which, yeah, no, I'm not surprised by that at all. That's a great comment as well, though, James. And then the other thing I wanted to mention with you talking about the lawyers, the Dragon lawyers, I'm going to call them that, was some of the problems that you've encountered where there are bugs with Dragon, accessibility bugs with the tool itself, but Dragon won't fix it because they're not really
Yes.
marketed to accessibility. So I just wondered if you wanted to expand on that.
Yes, so some of the issues I'm going to talk about today, I have gone to Dragon NaturallySpeaking, and I've ask them, hey, can you please address these? Because they are quite impactful for people with disabilities using the tool. But I've really struggled to get a clear answer from them on what their opinion is on those issues. They sort of see the navigation part of Dragon as sort of the secondary feature, and the text-to-speech part as, or the speech-to-text part, sorry, as the main feature with Dragon. So yeah, I've tried several times to reach out to them and get them to fix some of these issues that Dragon does have that other tools don't have. But unfortunately, no luck as of yet. Moving on.
Rosie
Oh, sorry.
speaking.
You go.
Sorry, we've got a comment in the chat and a hand up. I'll go to the comment in the chat first, and get which Gary says. I worked with someone in the past who said having lupus made her hands weak, less tired, and she used Dragon to help. Yeah, there's so many different groups that can benefit as well. James, we'll go to you for a comment now.
Thanks, Rosie. I'm wondering, Matthew, if you're going direct to Dragon or whether it's worth going through Heartgen, who create JSay, to flag it with them to talk with Dragon about. Like the producers of JSay, whether they have a bit more standing for Dragon to listen to.
Matt speaking, that's a great suggestion. They would probably have closer ties with the accessibility arm of Dragon. Yeah,
that the products work together properly. And this sounds like it's a potential. It's going to compromise the usefulness of JSay if users can't use it from a keyboard perspective.
Yeah.
Or from a screen reader perspective, it sort of negates the purpose of something like JSay, doesn't it?
Matt speaking, yeah, I believe it could. The issues I'm going to talk about, I'm not sure if they impact JSay as well as just Dragon on its own. But yeah, it's something that maybe we could all try and work out later, because the examples I've made, they're just available in CodePen, so anyone can actually try out the examples and see if it works or not.
There's a forum I've dropped in the chat for Jane, a link to a speech recognition forum, so it could be that you could put the inquiry there to see if there's any users with JSay, if either they've experienced it or want to come forward to talk with you about it a bit further. You may find if the issues are a bit broader from the JSay perspective as opposed to just Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, that was just me.
No, Matt speaking. Thanks, James. Yeah, that's a great link you sent through, forms.nobrainer.com. So yeah, I'll check it out, and I might ask people have experienced some of the issues I'll talk about later, or if not, I'll just share the issues anyway, and maybe we can get something going to get these issues actually fixed. That'd be cool.
You might get some volunteers come forward to say they'll be available to give it a test run or something.
Yeah. No, thank you.
Rosie speaking, and sorry, we have one more hand with Rob.
Thanks, Rosie. Okay, Matt. I use JSay, Dragon, and Jaws together. It's more a convenience thing. JSay is serviced by a single developer, which could be a bit of a barrier. It's interesting with the Microsoft's adoption of Nuance. There might be some segues there that you could back channel some networking with. I'm happy to have a chat offline, see if we can get something moving.
Matt speaking. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, I'll definitely take you up on that if we can reach out to that dev and get some more eyes on this. But yeah, let's continue on so I can show what the issues are.
Thank you.
So going on to mobile as well, what options people have there. So on iOS or Mac, which isn't mobile, but a Macintosh, you got voice control. So that's what Apple calls their built-in voice navigation tool. And then on Android, you have one called Voice Access, which from my experience, I find voice control is generally much better than voice access, but that is generally par for the course with iOS versus Android for the most part. But yeah, I find that the accuracy of voice control tends to do a lot better than the Android variant. All right, so now I've got a little video here of a demo of me using Dragon, going through a application form that I've made. So I'm going to show the video first, and then once it's done, it's only about a minute long, I'll go through and audio describe sort of what happened during the video, but you'll mostly hear my voice commands as I go through a first name, last name, email field, and then some questions about if I like ducks and kitties. And then at the end, there's a button where I click with mouse grid. So I'll go ahead and play this, and I'll make sure the audio is turned up. Start scrolling down. Show links. Choose one. Matt. Press tab. Putland. Press tab. Matt modality email. Click radio button. Choose one. Click of course. Choose two. Click checkbox. Mouse grid. 7. 8. Left click. And there you go. And there's a little demonstration of me going through and filling out a form with Dragon. The first thing I did was the entire form wasn't in view on my screen, so I used the start scrolling down command just to start scrolling down the page. I could have also just said scroll down. That would have taken me to the very bottom of the page. With Dragon, the show links command will put a number on anything that's clickable on the page. So that show links isn't just hyperlinks. It could be form fields, radio buttons, checkboxes, regular buttons. Anything that's clickable will get a number on it. So I can then say choose 1, for example, if I wanted to click where number 1 was on my screen. You can also do press keyboard keys with voice commands. So I can say, for example, press tab, like I did in the form, to move to the next form field. But you can say press whatever key on your keyboard to actually input that key press. Also, I had to edit the dictionary of Dragon so they understood what Putland was, because when I tried to say Putland without putting that in, it would put in Poland. So I had to train Dragon to understand when I say Putland, put in my last name, P-U-T-L-A-N-D. And then when I got to the email, I said the command Matt modality email, and it didn't actually input that text. What it actually did instead was put my matt@modalityco.com email address in. So the reason why it did that is I set up what's called auto text in Dragon. So I set up a special command that says, when I say Matt modality email, then put in matt@modalityco.com. So you can set up special commands like that if you need things spelled a certain way, or if you need want a special command to input a whole bunch of text at once. Auto text is really good for that. You can also, with Dragon, set up specialized macros, which do a lot more than just inputting text. So you could have applications open, you can have several key presses or clicks happen all at once, just with a few bits of a command that you make up. So an example of something that you might do every week might be, for example, filling out your timesheet for your work. So you could set up a command like fill out my timesheet. And you could actually set it up to actually open up the web browser, go to the right URL, go to the timesheet section, and fill out your timesheet for you. So Dragon's pretty cool with some of the features like that, where you can set something quite complex up and have it all happen at once just with a few words. So it is quite powerful what you can do with it. And also click checkbox there. That clicked a legal checkbox that said I confirm everything I entered is true. Because there was only one checkbox on the page, it just went ahead and checked that one for me. I also said click radio button, which put numbers on the radio button options I had there for do you like ducks and do you like kitties. So we've got numbers 1 to 4 appearing on there. And the options for both of those questions are yes or of course. So when I said click of course, Dragon asked me which of course did I mean. So it put a number on just those 2 options, and then I got to say choose 2. And the last thing I did was I activated mouse grid, which puts a grid on your screen with numbers in each quadrant of the grid. And then all I need to do is say what quadrant do I want to move my mouse into. So I ended up, I believe, saying 7, and I think it went 8. And then once the mouse was over the button, I could then say left click to click on that button. So yeah, that's a quick introduction to how Dragon works. On the next slide, I have a table here showing the main functions. Most of these commands apply to Dragon, but some of them, like show, works in utterly voice. And on mobile, like voice control and voice access, you might need to say tap instead of click, because you're tapping on something on your phone, not clicking with your mouse. So yeah, we've got show or show links, puts a number on everything clickable. Choose N or just N will click the numbers on screen. Click, tap a label. We'll try to click the label that you can see. There's also click radio button and click checkbox. Those are self-explanatory. It will put a number on all radio buttons or all checkboxes. Move up or down and then N, which is a number. So if you have like a combo box list or a select element where you've got multiple options in a list, and you need to highlight and select one, you could go to a select element, click on it to expand it open, and then you can say move down 3, and then the little highlighter will move down 3, and then you can say press enter to select the one that you want. So you can also do that with radio buttons as well. I could have said move down or move down 1 with the radio buttons, and it would change which radio button is selected. Start scrolling up and down, I showed that. It's also stop scrolling, which will stop any scrolling that's currently going on. And then there's also mouse grid, which I showed off as well. So yeah, that's sort of the basic commands that we use. Something quite important that a lot of people don't know about is if you are using Dragon, you do need a web extension for you to get the full features of it on the web. So it's an extension that makes the desktop version of Dragon actually compatible with websites. So if you don't have that web extension, some things like show links won't actually work. So yeah, it's available for Chrome and Edge. So yeah, a really important one not to forget about. All right, moving on to some common accessibility issues. What happens when things go wrong due to poor HTML or CSS on a website? So let's dive into our first example, which relates to labeling of controls. So I'm going to show another little video of me going through another form that I've made. Basically on the screen at the moment, there are 4 checkboxes, all with the label apples. And I have in the code gone in and actually changed the names of these checkboxes. So I've added what's known as an ARIA label to the input element. And that allows me to provide a different name to the object. So that causes all sorts of interesting things when interacting with different voice input controls. I will go through the results of my testing shortly, but in this example, I'm showing off mostly Dragon and also a little bit of Windows speech. So I'll play this, and then I'll also audio describe what happens once it's done. Click apples. Cancel. Click carrots. Click apples are good. Click I think the apple's rotten right to the core. Click I really like apples. Click apples good. Click apples rotten. Click apples. Cancel. Click carrots. All right, so to explain sort of what happened there, in the first example I went through Dragon, I said click apples, and when I did that, all 4 checkboxes lit up with a number. So even though I have changed the name of these checkboxes to something else, one of them is called carrots, so that doesn't have the word apples in it anywhere. Dragon still understood what I meant. It still understood that the visible label for the checkbox matches up with the checkbox, so the user must know, that's what they mean. But then I went through with Dragon as well, and I actually started reading through the different ARIA labels I have. So I went through carrots, apples are good, I think the apple's rotten right to the core, and so on. And Dragon also went and clicked on each of the individual checkboxes on the page. So what does that mean? It means that the visible label, will be taken into account with Dragon. So you don't need to worry too much if there's a hidden ARIA label, changing it to something else. But it can be a little bit dangerous in some cases where maybe you give a command such as click carrots, and then the apples checkbox gets checked. And you're like, well, I didn't actually want the apples checkbox to get checked. That's not what I see. In my example, I've revealed the ARIA label, but normally that would be invisible to you. It would be invisible to someone using voice control. So you wouldn't know that that checkbox is actually labeled as carrots, but Dragon will go ahead and click on it. So that's something to be aware of. The second tool I tried there was Windows Speech Recognition on Windows 10. And that one, when I said click apples, only the checkboxes which had apples in the ARIA label lit up. So the checkbox that had carrots as its ARIA label did not get a number on it. So that is especially dangerous for Windows Speech, because if I saw the word apples next to that checkbox and I said click apples, Windows Speech would not know what I'm talking about, because the name of that checkbox is actually carrots in the code, and that's what the tool sees. So that's what it believes it to be. When I said click carrots, then Windows Speech happily clicked on the apples checkbox, because that's the actual name of it. So yeah, ARIA label is quite dangerous for this sort of purpose. You really shouldn't use ARIA label to change the visible label of a control to something else, because yeah, it will lead to undesirable results. On some of the other tools that I tested, Utterly Voice doesn't have a command for certain labels, so you can't actually say click apples with Utterly Voice. Instead, how that one works is you can just say show, and everything will get a number on it, and then you can just click whatever you want. But otherwise, Utterly Voice didn't have any problems. Voice control on iOS understood both apples and carrots. It wouldn't actually select the bottom apples checkbox until I scrolled down. And that's because voice control, it seems to only provide you, if I got 4 apples checkboxes here, all with the word apples on them. It seems that voice control caps out 3 checkboxes, or 3 options when you got multiple things with the same name. So, but all I had to do was scroll down the page a bit, and then voice control started working on the bottom checkbox as well when I said tap apples. Voice access on Android only pays attention to the accessible name. So voice access worked pretty much exactly the same as Windows Speech. It did not recognize the first apples checkbox because the name of that is carrots. But when I said tap carrots, it happily tapped on the apples checkbox with no issues. So yeah, this is something that is actually in WCAG. It's known as 253 label and name. So the visible label does not match the accessible name is essentially the issue here. If the visible label isn't included in the accessible name, you will run into issues. So I've got a little bit of code on the screen here. I've got a normal checkbox where I've got an input type equals checkbox. And then I got a label after that that says apples, and the label and input are associated with each other with the for and ID attribute. So that's just a normal regular checkbox, whereas the one on the right, it's the same code, but I added the ARIA label attribute to the input and I put in carrots on it. So this checkbox is no longer an apples checkbox, it's a carrots checkbox, and therefore you're going to run into some issues with voice control. So this one, thankfully, is covered very well by the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Moving on to another type of issue, character count. So for fields with a max length or an expected maximum amount of characters, you should specify via a character count below the field. So in this little example on the screen here, I've got a big text area or a big text field with a lot of text in it. So it's got some lorem ipsum text. And just below it, it actually says you have 247 characters too many. So it's telling me I've got too much stuff in this form field. I need to get rid of 247 characters in order for this field to be valid. It's really important to actually specify how much a user is over the character count. Too often, these sorts of character form fields that will just say you've gone over or you have 0 characters left, and the user doesn't know how much they need to remove to actually get to acceptable number. And this is a particularly big problem for people using voice control, because sometimes, a lot of the time, people who use voice control, especially people with dyslexia, may actually write their answer somewhere else. They may write their answer in a Word document or in another tool or in the dictation box, which is a feature in Dragon where you have all your voice control or dictation features inside that box. And then you might then take what you've written and then paste it into a form. And it's especially bothersome if the form field doesn't tell you how much you're over, because then, yeah, you don't know how much you need to remove, and then you really got to mess around with it quite a bit until you get to where you want to. A really good example of a really accessible character count component is the one from gov.uk. They have a really fantastic character count component, and I will quickly share this little link in the chat with everyone if you're interested. That one works really well with screen readers and works nicely for people who use voice input as well. Sort this back around. There we go. As a even worse example than not showing character count, disallowing paste is especially bad. It's really bad usability in general, but it's especially harmful for people using dictation, people with dyslexia, and of course screen reader users as well. I've got a little example here of a form field. It's got the label your life story. It's a required field. And then I've got a little error message popping out below it that says, alert, no pasting allowed. You must rewrite everything. So yeah, that's what it feels like a lot when a field does not let you paste inside of it. So a really, really important one to not do, because yeah, it can really, really impact people from a usability point of view, but especially people use dictation or people with dyslexia. Here's a bit of an interesting one. Not showing the cell headings in Excel is something that you may not have thought about before. In some cases, you may, organization may be using Excel for a form or something like that, which, you know, isn't generally best practice, but it happens. And the cell headings are the A, B, C, D column and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows that you see at the top and left-hand sides of Excel. They let you know what cell is which. So that is really, really important for people using voice input, because if those letters and numbers are hidden, then you don't have a quick way of actually navigating around this form. People using tools like Dragon can actually say, you know, click cell C5, and then they can jump straight to where they need to be to then fill out the Excel spreadsheet. Whereas if you don't have those cell headings, then you have to use a lot of sort of keyboard presses, like, you know, move down 3 or press down arrow, press down arrow, press right arrow, press down arrow, and so on, until you get to eventually where you need to be, and then you can do your voice commands to fill out the form. So thankfully, it's pretty easy to reveal the headings in Excel. You just go to the View tab, and then there's a headings checkbox. Make sure that is checked to make sure that you're not making forms in Excel harder to fill out. The last example I have here is probably the main reason why I wanted to talk about voice navigation, because this is the big one. This is the one that really, really impacts a lot of people using voice input on the web. In this example, I have 4 different checkboxes. I have an apples checkbox, and that is a normal basic HTML checkbox with no styling on it whatsoever. The second one I've labeled berries, and it's a styled input checkbox. So I've added some CSS to the checkbox to make it look a bit bigger, a bit nicer. The third option, the carrots one, I have actually hidden the input element, and it's still there in the HTML. Screen readers will still find it. It'll still find a checkbox just fine when using a screen reader. But the way that I've hidden it causes some problems with voice navigation, and I'll show that shortly. And then the fourth one that I've labeled donuts is also a hidden input, but I have done some changes to the CSS to make it not an issue for people using voice input. So I will play my little video now, and then I'll audio describe what happened after. Click apples. Click berries. Click carrots. Click carrots. Click carrots. Click donuts. Click checkbox. Cancel. Show links. Cancel. Press Shift tab. Press spacebar. All right, so to explain what happened there, I was going through a Dragon, and the first 2 checkboxes, apples and berries, worked just fine. I said click apples, it checked it. I said click berries, it checked it. But then when I got to carrots, I said click carrots, and the berries checkbox unchecked. I went, what? That's not what I interacted with at all. So I tried again, click carrots, and then the donuts checkbox got checked. And then I tried click carrots again, and then the donuts checkbox got unchecked. So I kept trying with other things. I tried click donuts, and that worked fine again. So I went, okay, click checkbox. And every checkbox except carrots got a number. So I had one apples, had one of berries, had one of donuts, no worries. But the carrots did not have a number. So I tried show links, and same thing. Apples, berries, and donuts had a number, but not carrots. So that made it extremely difficult for me to actually go and click on the carrots checkbox. What I ended up having to do at the end there was I pressed Shift Tab to move my focus back because my focus was on the donuts checkbox. So I pressed Shift Tab to move my focus up to the carrots checkbox. And then I said press spacebar to actually finally check the carrots checkbox. Now, this issue doesn't only impact checkboxes. This issue can also occur on radio buttons, and it can also occur on toggle switches. It can also occur on any type of input you have where you're hiding the input element. And you might ask yourself, if you're not a developer, why are developers hiding the input element? Why aren't they just styling the checkbox? Why are they hiding the input and then putting something else on the screen? And the reason why they do it is because developers often get a lot more control with how the checkbox looks visually. When they hide the default checkbox, they make it visually hidden. It's still there in HTML, it's just hidden. You can't see it. And then they make it so they might make a really nice, stylish looking checkbox in its place. And they make the fake checkbox part of the label. So if you click the checkbox or the fake checkbox or the label, it actually ends up clicking the input element that's hidden away in the background. But if you do it the wrong way, it can completely break voice input. And for just a single checkbox like this, it's not so much of a big deal. But imagine if you had many checkboxes that you had to check in a form. That becomes really annoying. You can't use your regular method, so you have to start using your press keystroke commands. Or if you're filling out a form that has a lot of radio button questions, like a survey, you're going to be there for a while, having to use a keyboard all the time to navigate around. So this is probably the biggest issue that I see with voice input that is not covered by WCAG at all, which is really disappointing. And I feel like it's one that a lot of accessibility professionals don't actually know about. They don't think that this is an issue. They often presume that if it works with screen readers, it will work with voice input as well. Not always the case, sadly. The results for that one, for the other assistive tech as well. So of course you saw Dragon, the hidden input was broken. With Windows Speech, the hidden input was also broken, but all the others worked fine. Utterly Voice was the only one that actually worked with all 4 checkboxes. So a big tick for Utterly Voice. They managed there, that tool managed to click all the checkboxes, even the hidden one. So that is my personal best choice if you want a navigation-based voice input, because you're going to have the least issues. Voice input on iOS, voice control on iOS, both of the hidden inputs can work. So I found it a bit unreliable, but yeah, they can both also work on voice control. So iOS as well, another big tick. And then you got voice access on Android, and no surprises there, the hidden input was broken. So yeah, this is a really, really big one. And as I said before, many devs hide the input elements to instead provide a pretty one. So you got to be really careful with how you hide your input elements, as it will break voice navigation drastically if you use the wrong CSS to hide it. On the screen, I have the SR only class. This class is typically used for hiding text on the screen. So you might use it to provide some hidden text for a screen reader. You do not want to use this class for hiding inputs because it will break voice input. The main problematic parts of SR only is the height and width. So the height and width is set to 1 pixel. If you do that, that will break the checkbox. It will make it no longer findable by voice input users. Also, the position can also mess it up as well. So with SR only, the position's absolute. That can mess it up as well, and make it no longer work. So that's another big issue there. I have on my browser here, if I go here, I do have here the code pen that I used to create the hidden input that was fixed. The main differences that I put in here is I made the width and height no longer 1 pixel. So I made them big enough that tools like Dragon can actually see it. I have made the position relative instead of absolute. And when you use position relative, you might need to add a margin to actually have the hidden checkbox line up properly with your fake checkbox. So the opacity of it, I put in as well to actually make it hidden so you can't see it. So I've got 0.00001. That makes it effectively invisible. But if I set the opacity to 1 here in the CSS, you'll see after a brief refresh, you'll see there's actually is 2 checkboxes here. There is the input, and then there is my fake checkbox. They're sort of overlapping each other there. So you got to make sure that the fake checkbox lines up with the real one, so that you're not getting this sort of issue where the fake checkbox is over here, but the real one's here, or vice versa. But yeah, height, width, opacity, and position are the main properties you want to be looking at when it comes to this. If you see those and you see the height and width 1 pixel, it's probably not going to work with Dragon. So that takes us to the wrap up. Final points, talk about voice input is helpful in many different situations, and more people than you think use it. There's huge variety of different people who may use or find benefit from voice navigation or voice dictation. There's more accessibility professionals can do to ensure access for these users. So WCAG unfortunately doesn't cover everything, but the good news is tools like Windows Speech Recognition is a great tool for testing. If you can't afford Dragon, you can use Windows Speech, because a lot of the issues that do come up, if there is something wrong, then typically it doesn't work with Windows Speech. So that's a good one to test with. And try out voice input more often when testing, especially when dealing with forms, especially those checkboxes and radio buttons. You really want to make sure that you can actually activate them with your voice easily. So that comes to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, my details on the screen. I'm on LinkedIn, Matthew-Putland. My email is matt@modalityco.com, and we're available at modalityco.com as well. So thank you so much for joining.
Rosie speaking. Thank you so much, Matt. I am going to stop the recording there, and then we can have a little chat, and Matt can be open for questions, but I will just stop the recording now once I can get to it.